if you've been enjoying this content so far, if you're new to this channel, we talk about things like this all the time. So hit that follow button right now. Make sure notifications are on so you know I'm going live. We do this 6 nights a week. Don't want you to miss out on any of our content. We got a lot of it for you. !support social and chat for our social media. We got Twitter, where we tweet these things, let people know what's going on. We got Discord, heart and soul of the community. Everything happens within Discord. We want you to be a part of the Discord community. Jump into the Discord community, right? We have online, offline conversations, including an open walk-on panel where audience members like you at home may participate. So in case you ever thought like anyone here was wrong, right? And how could that ever be? Who was ever wrong on the internet, right? Anyway, you can be on here and you can have your voice heard. So consider jumping into that Discord. And then of course we have YouTube, where you have the VODs, right? We provide VODs for you in case you missed anything. Like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Consider becoming a YouTube member, hitting that join button, supporting this community, keeping that YouTube channel up and running. Okay, I'm going to introduce the next topic. We'll do opening statements again. All right, so next topic. Throughout recent years, there have been multiple high-profile controversies centered about private businesses refusing to service customers. A particularly infamous example of this centers around a cake shop that refused to service a gay couple. Should private businesses be able to refuse service for any reason? Is it fair to have the government step in and regulate these interactions? Or would it be fair to let the market punish businesses that refuse certain portions of the public? Okay, yeah. So we're talking about private businesses and like what they are allowed to do, right? Or should a private business be able to act, in terms of its customers in any way that it can, like, assuming like it doesn't enact violence on them? Can it just say, no, I'm not going to serve this portion and have a valid reason to do so? So opening statements, Dylan?
Can you guys hear me? Is my shit working?
Mm-hmm.
Thank God. Oh. So I'm not a huge fan of just leaving things up to the market. Never been my cup of tea, There's certain policies in place, Civil Rights Act, things like that, that are perfect for preventing market failures in which they do not cater to a certain demographic of people. If we were to live in a society in which certain, monopolistic enterprises exist, which we do, I'm just saying, we do. Amazon, Walmart, whatever, it would be absolutely unjust, immoral, and a terrible, terrible thing for them not to serve a specific demographic or minority on people. It is totally within reason for a rational government to step in and intervene in cases in which people are not being served based on their membership of a particular demographic. And generally speaking, this provides better consequences for a majority of those people who are disenfranchised or alienated as being a member of this particular group. I wouldn't want to live in a society in which people who share any characteristic that I do aren't catered to, and I don't think any of you guys would. So I'm just going to leave it there, and then we'll carry on.
Wick.
Okay, so I would largely agree with Dylan on this. I think that we can all imagine scenarios where a private entity would overstep its bounds, and that the government should have a say in regulating what they can and cannot do, and who they should and should not serve. That said, I'm not sure we would all draw the lines in the same spot. I think that it is a perfectly reasonable argument to say, well, a private entity should not have to service certain individuals that they find noxious. I think that a lot of leftists would agree when it comes to Twitter banning Nazis or accounts that they do not want to service or provide service for. They would say, in that case, we should have the right to not allow these things to be on these platforms. I would take a little issue with that. I do not think censorship is a good thing at all. But that being said, there are lines I would draw where a private entity should be forced to service different demographics. The civil rights legislation is a very good example. And that's all I have to say on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Let's go to Roadman.
Okay. Spent 2 hours. 2 whole hours getting fucking lectured about Russia and what the fuck is going on here, dude. Oh my god, dude. Oh my fucking god, dude. First of all, these businesses, they can do whatever the fuck they want, okay? How dare a government try to come in here and tell me that I should do anything? If I sell hamburgers for a living, guys. I sell hamburgers, hot dogs, steak and cheese, breakfast sandwiches. I got the best breakfast sandwich this side of the Mississippi.
We can tell.
First of all, I'm not finished. Do not interrupt me. First of all, if the government ever comes in and says, you need to serve this idiot who's going to talk to me, they're out of their mind, dude. You need to let the businesses do whatever they want. If they don't want to serve you because you're black, because you're gay, because you're this, because you're that, that's fine. Don't go to that business. I can't wait to get into this topic. I can't wait to get into these arguments. I woke up from the 2-hour nap I just took. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, I think the government should absolutely dare to tell you what to do, not just as a private business owner, but generally speaking. The government should dare to do that a lot more in the United States. They could really use some help because the private businesses seem to be doing a very shitty job. But I would actually kind of agree with you, Roma, but on the sense that I don't want it. I think it's too gray and too vague, like what Wick said. That I think we all will draw the line at certain like thresholds. So I think for me, it's more like I'd want certain very explicit, very like coherent guidelines of when a customer is behaving in X way, you can refuse service of them. But otherwise, you should always give service. I don't care if you think the guy's a jerk. I don't think you can kick them out of your business. And that way we can avoid like categorizing race or sexual orientation as something distinctly unique to other features that apparently we are allowed to discriminate based on, which I don't like. So yeah, I would just like do what you want in a rope man, but the other way around. Serve everyone all the time.
Hey,
Fuck you if you don't.
happy takes.
Yeah, so this panel has been incredibly based so far. Freedom of association. I love this from all of you. I would say as long as the government is not discriminating against anybody based on any certain characteristic, I don't give a fuck who you want to sell your products to. They're your products. You can give them to whoever the fuck you want to. Thank you, Roadman. Based.
Hey, last year's name.
Yeah, so the answer is to let the market punish these businesses. That's all you need. And if you look at the kind of government intervention in markets that you guys are talking about is actually what allows the kind of discrimination that you're trying to get rid of to happen without being punished. That's what happened with segregation, with Jim Crow laws. And the Civil Rights Act was not to stop individuals, businesses from discriminating. It was to stop the Jim Crow laws from enabling the discrimination. The way those laws did that is by forcing everyone to discriminate, thus not allowing the businesses that did not want to discriminate to compete against the ones who did, right? It's kind of protectionism. It protects the discrimination. As long as you don't have the government enabled to provide that protection for the discrimination, then the market can punish them. And then if it's sufficiently bad, then the market will actually get rid of it. So what the kind of government intervention you want is actually what allows that discrimination to exist and to be sustainable and to flourish. If you can find any counterexample of this, then I'd like to hear it.
Hi.
Sorry, wrong button. Yeah, I'm actually glad that last username is here because I disagree with him. Largely what last username is definitely going with is more of the basically hatred and like bigotry is illogical, and to be honest, it's true. You're openly telling customers to get fucked, right? And that's people that will make you money. The problem is that hatred and bigotry is not logical. This is why we have protected classes. Why we have people who we say, hey, look, if you have too many people with hatred and bigotry towards you, you will find entire communities that will not serve you, that will not protect you, that will not give you the goods and services that you need or deserve to have as basically a citizen. Yeah, this is actually one of the reasons I'm a social conservative. Actually, is that I believe that our morals should be codified into law, and this is one that I absolutely agree with. Is that we need to be able to protect those who can't always protect themselves, or who are not going to be open to having being engaged in a normal community. And we've definitely seen this with in the South in the eras of Jim Crow, which last year name was talking about. Like, it wasn't solely the fact that everyone had to discriminate, but people were openly encouraged to discriminate. So yeah, actually, I'm fundamentally disagreeing with this in the regards that I think this is absolutely something we need, and it's a-okay for the government to come into business and be like, yeah, there's certain people you can't touch for these and this reason. Thank you.
Hey, Doobie.
I'm actually pretty torn about this. So my instinct is to take Roban's position and to say, hey, fuck you. If you're black, or you have red hair, or you look funny, and I don't want to do business with you, fuck off, go somewhere else. I don't need to give you a reason. Even if I told you openly, hey, I just don't like Armenians, so I'm not going to service you. That should be fine because it's my fucking business, right? That's my instinct on the issue. That's my instinct with hiring too. I think people should be able to discriminate openly in hiring. I'd be totally fine with like no Turks need apply signs, right? But I think that when you're talking about public businesses, right? Typically, these things need to get licensed by the city that they're in, right? By the state that they're in, right? And if that state does not want to perpetuate, or enable hateful behavior, quote unquote, discriminatory behavior, does not want to have a situation where people within their state feel discriminated against or targeted by people because of their ethnicity or whatever the fuck, right? Then I think it makes sense for the state to say, hey, actually, yeah, we don't care. Fuck you. If you want to do business here, you need a license. To get that license, you need to agree not to discriminate. I think that's fine. But again, I'm torn on the topic, so I could go either way.
So the first and most fundamental role of a government or a state is to protect its citizens. And when it fails, the government fails to do this, we should hold it responsible. We should make changes so that it can. So this assertion that was made by last username, that had it not been for Jim Crow laws, had it not been for the government intervention in the first place, that discrimination would not have been allowed to happen on a systemic scale, I fundamentally disagree with. Again, if we take the state out of the equation, in a hypothetical, sure, but we have to acknowledge reality that the state is in the equation.
An example.
And as long as the state is in the equation, say one more time.
Can you provide an example?
You haven't provided an example of the opposite. In what example? In what example?
My example is Jim Crow.
Not having. Okay, but your example
source.
But your example is flawed, is what I'm trying to tell you.
What do you mean?
You're acting as if that the Jim Crow laws are the ones that enabled it. You've asserted it, but you have not convinced me or proved it in any way, shape, or form. So you can't just say it and make it true. You have to actually show how it is true.
When we had Jim Crow laws, we had discrimination.
Okay,
Jim Crow laws went away, discrimination went away.
Ice cream sales increase when heat waves happen doesn't mean ice cream sales cause heat waves. You understand that?
Yeah, but why should the government get involved at all? Why do you want the government to get
involved?
Because
the government has
I can make economic arguments
too. Let me answer this.
Yeah.
And the government has a responsibility to protect its people. That's the government's number one responsibility in my mind.
The government
certain groups,
that's really open-ended.
When certain
protect the people to be
let me finish.
You're just saying
let me finish.
I'm not going to let you
finish.
Certain
groups and demographics.
No. Hey, Han. Wick finishes, and then Roadman, you can respond.
Sure. When certain groups, as happened many times in the past in history, when certain groups and demographics are targeted by businesses and targeted by communities and unprotected and hurt and harmed, both economically and physically, the government has a right to step in and make laws and regulations to ensure that this harm stops. And this is what we combat. When we combat things, because the Jim Crow laws didn't happen in a vacuum. They happened because the people of those communities wanted it to happen.
What are you talking about?
If they want it to happen, the government will do it.
What are you talking about harm?
Right? Okay. Thanks to democracy, the government does what's popular.
That's not true.
So if those communities want to discriminate, and then the government's going to do what those communities want. And they're going to protect that discrimination with things like Jim Crow laws, which is exactly what happened. Right?
And so
the government can't do any better than the popular morality of society.
Last username.
Would you agree, really quick? Last username. Would you agree that these were appropriate at one point, but they are no longer appropriate now?
What's appropriate?
This was appropriate after Jim Crow because Jim Crow was so unprecedented in the way it discriminated against people, and now that that's no longer an issue, we don't need these laws, this government intrusion into private business.
I think it was absolutely appropriate for the federal government to override the Jim Crow laws that were state laws, and that was great. I don't think it needed to do any more than that. Right.
Yes, but you're stating that there should be limits to freedom of association, correct? So whether that be based on race or, well, you just said you were in favor of Jim Crow or the opposition of Jim Crow and the anti-discrimination acts that came from that. So yes, you would be.
I'm in favor of laws that destroy other laws that are discriminatory, right? Which is what the Jim Crow laws were. So it's good that the federal government overrode the Jim Crow laws and said you can't do that.
Yeah, but none of us are advocating for laws that advocate for discrimination. We're just saying we don't want any like incursions on our hiring or association practices.
Wait, okay,
Well,
but I think I need a really short-term, view of like history, because you're saying, hey, maybe this was needed back then, but it isn't it anymore. This isn't just protecting black people.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Well, not you.
He's talking to me. He's talking to me.
Okay.
It's not just protecting black people from white races, right? It's also protecting women. It's protecting gay people, trans people, religious minorities, right? All of whom still face lots of discrimination in the United States, right? So I don't understand why you say
laws on the books. No, Doobie, but those were laws on the books against women minorities, correct? And now that we've removed them,
that doesn't matter, because so you're saying that if in the time of like Jim Crow, right, all they needed to do really was take those laws off the books, and the culture surrounding those laws that put those laws into place is like doesn't need to be addressed at all.
Time. No, I think that
would
would
take time.
But hold on.
Yes, correct.
Oh,
hold on, but
this is going to give me a brain hemorrhage.
The government's only part in that is removing those laws. It's not adding anything more to the situation. It's just removing the discrimination that's on the books.
And then in placing a Civil Rights Act which protects classes.
So
what's the point of this?
No further
federally, for the federal government. This is not for private institutions. That's not how this is supposed to be interpreted.
It ought to be. It ought to be.
You can say it ought to be, but that's not what it
Yes, it absolutely
is.
should. No, the thing
that's
is
not what it is.
Things ought to be like this
too bad.
because we need it ought to be like this because we must address the market failures which refuse to actually do and give goods and services to certain people. I'm going to go to gay
so let's
marriage.
see those market show me those market failures.
Okay,
you're going to argue that we need a law to protect us from market failures.
I'll tell you about market failures.
Or some evidence that that's going to happen.
Market failures fail to address prescription health costs, side effects.
No. We're talking specifically about discrimination.
Okay, fine. If you want to
go off on some weird tangent.
Thank you, whoever said this is about
discrimination.
This is about discrimination against protected classes. Stop expanding this out.
Yeah, we're talking about systematically a market just saying we're just not going to serve some race or some gender or sex or whatever just because we don't like it.
Let's be clear. It's not just about race, sex, religion. There is discrimination, especially in pharmaceutical companies that put unfair and unjust burden on the poor. They hike up these prices to astronomical levels. That is a failure of the marketplace.
No. You're talking about something completely different.
Can we
because
not?
they have
Why are we
real demographic?
What are you
talking about?
Oh my god!
That completely addresses a real demographic. If you don't think poor people would count as
talking about market discriminating against particular classes.
You're trying
you
to
can
shop
market is discriminating. The market is discriminating against poor people by its failures to control for prices.
Yeah, market discriminating against people who don't have money to buy the stuff. I don't call that discrimination. I call that just treating everyone equally.
Yeah, so when we hike up prices, it excludes a particular class and excludes them from participating in the market.
You're
not just market failure. It's a
clear
clear demonstration, dude. It's clear.
Yeah, okay. I got to split hairs here. Like, I'm 100% behind the protected classes thing, and I outlined that in my intro for the reasons that I have. But you're literally going to make me just flip sides here when it comes to dealing with this. When it comes to the poor are not a protected class. There's a serious difference between a people who have just don't even have the votership or the political power to do anything versus, guess what? The poor are the majority. They do have the votership. They do have recompense politically against things that they don't like. Whether they use it or not, completely different story. But yeah, I'm with last username on this one. Like, you can't treat the poor as a protected class.
No, this is a mischaracterization. Let's not pretend that a poor person has the same political power as someone who is rich and able to lobby and able to utilize corporate systems in order to press their will. Let's not pretend that this is the same.
Why even go there? Why
That's not the question, nor does it matter.
Yeah.
What are you
obviously the
talking about?
Lamborghini market discriminates against poor
It does
people.
not matter.
It
We're
sells more
talking about
Lambos to rich people than poor
protected
people.
classes.
That's not discrimination. It's not even, and it's not some weird conspiracy. Like,
have you ever heard of social Wick, have you ever heard of social mobility? Have you ever heard of this thing where people can come in and out of fucking social
guarantee.
classes?
And simply because someone is not able to socially move up, or it's much harder for them to socially move up, to socially... Oh, go on.
Half-Baked Takes, finish your point.
I'm just saying there's a difference between protected classes and the fucking poor. People that can come in and out of poverty, people that something so subjective as your fucking social or your wealth or your income should not be something that we protect on a governmental level. That's ridiculous.
Look, I'll make you a deal, guys. I will concede that markets discriminate against how much money you have to spend if you concede that they don't discriminate against races and protected classes that otherwise have nothing to do with that, right?
Yeah, why are you dying on this hill? Like, some people
Why
here
am I
are
dying
fine
on
with... Some people here are not even fine with saying you shouldn't, like, turn away black people. Fight them on that. That's like...
I mean,
before you fight for the poor.
Trying to keep on topic here.
That also
it's like we're not even there. I'm with you on the poor stuff. I really am.
Okay,
but it's like we can't even argue about that if people are fine with just
like if I'm selling Gucci bags and the fucking poor guy walks in, a homeless guy, get the fuck out of my store, bro. That's what I'm saying. Like that's what we're talking about here. Like you can talk about.
We're talking about market failures.
Sure. Let's go to Ty, then Doobie.
Oh, okay. So the only thing I want to hit here is that, like, the protected class for me, and what they should be, and I'm pretty sure that they always are, or at least so far, is that to qualify for protected class is something you can't control. It's usually your race, your sex, your sexual orientation. It fundamentally is a makeup of who you are, that you don't just get to be like, oh, I'm not this tomorrow. Say what you will about economics, is that there is mobility in economics. That way is completely different class.
I don't know, you said tomorrow, and I don't think if you think you're not going to be poor tomorrow.
Well, yeah, I knew you guys were going to go down that road. Look,
I mean, it's fair. It's not that easy to stop there before.
Don't get hung up on that.
Man, I gotta
He's saying it can change over time.
Hey, no, hey, Half-Baked, I don't know if you're right or left, but just let the left kill itself on this one. Like, I thoroughly enjoy.
Let the record show that the radical left
friendly neighborhood enlightened centrist
into the ground.
Tiberius.
I am not an enlightened centrist.
Let's go to Doobie, and then Dylan.
Yeah. So, I guess what I'm wondering, right? First of all, with this discrimination against poor thing is really dumb, but beyond that, so why isn't it in the interest of like a state government or a local government, right, that doesn't want to encourage or enable or perpetuate racist attitudes or sexist attitudes or like discriminatory religious attitudes? Why isn't it like their business to say that if you want to do business here, if you want to get a license, if you want to use our roads and our infrastructure to support your business, you need to agree to these things, and one of those things is not to discriminate. Like, why isn't that
not in their interest? Because if it's not a popular sentiment, then it's not in their interest to do that, because they're not going to get elected. Assuming this is a democracy you're talking about.
If
the popular sentiment is to not discriminate, then the government's going to do that. However, if the popular sentiment is to discriminate, the government's going to protect the discrimination, because that's what's going to get them elected.
Right, which is why the
sentiment is not to discriminate, then the business is not going to discriminate. Show me an example of where that's happening.
But the government doesn't.
Doobie.
Before I piss myself,
Doobie, just go to pee. Just go pee.
Okay, fine.
Dylan,
I'm
Doobie,
peeing.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, last username. Maybe you're right. There are some places in the United States, and I'm sure in other countries, where people are still very racist, sexist, anti-Muslim, whatever the fuck, right? And they might, if you gave them a vote, they might vote in favor of discriminatory policies or discriminatory whatever, right? That is true. But this is why this exists at the federal level, right? And why Title 8 or Title 7, one of those things, is about state and local governments too.
What if the racism is at the federal level too?
This also prohibits state and local businesses from discriminating this way, because even at the national level, the federal level, there is an interest in shaping the culture in some way away from discriminatory attitudes. If what we're
But there
interested
isn't
in,
an interest.
but
There's
there
only an
is.
interest in
But there
getting
is,
elected
because if
again.
you have, wait, hold on.
They don't-
But okay, please. But one of the ways you get elected is you help the economy. You make sure that your citizens and your population are more comfortable, whatever the fuck, right? So if they don't want a portion of the population, a portion of the voter base, right, to be underserved and unhappy, right, and not to vote for them, they're going to support policies that say you can't discriminate against these people.
Actually, no. The interest is not in helping the economy. The interest is just staying in power. Sometimes good economic decisions help that. But if it's really popular to discriminate against something, they'll gladly sacrifice a little bit of economic productivity in order to have some discrimination policy that people like.
Do you think that's a good thing? Or do you think
The
that
good thing that the government can do that? No, I don't. I would rather just not let the government interfere with the market and let the market solve the problem.
But the market doesn't solve the problem. The market never fucking has. Never once. Never not once.
Give me an example. Show me an example of this happening.
Why did you say what you said in your opening statement then? If the market doesn't solve the problem, then why did you have that opinion?
It's a matter of personal freedom, because I believe in freedom, and I believe in allowing owners of businesses.
Let me ask you this. Why would you expect the government to solve the problem where the market couldn't?
I'm not saying that the government doesn't always
would a democratic government
has different
want to
incentives.
solve the problem?
You understand that the government has different incentives.
Their incentive is to get elected, right? To do what's popular.
Yes and no. Yes and
no. I just wanted to address
Dylan,
the fact
then
that
Katie, then Ty.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that. Okay, so markets tend to fail on the front that I feel like you're interpreting individual actors as rational actors, in the sense that profits are what driving these people to make rational actions, when we have historical examples of job markets failing to provide certain minorities with jobs. The whole Irish need not apply thing, right? Doobie kind of made reference to that earlier on. So when we're talking about a democratic government, right, if I personally believe in a representative democracy, in the sense that we can have elected officials make decisions on behalf of the populace to prevent things like discrimination, racism, enact the Civil Rights Act. But on the front of job market failures as well, which I do think count, because now we have things like race, citizenship, creed, religion. We have these things as protected classes. I think it's important for the government to be able to intervene in these cases. Individuals are not rational actors in the market.
The making profit, you need to make profit to exist, right? A business needs to profit to survive. If they're not as profitable as their competitors, they're going to cease to exist. So yeah, people are definitely driven by the desire to.
They're not solely driven by that.
They have to be, or they won't continue to exist, right?
They do continue to exist despite this. Do you think that not hiring an Irish person will decrease your profits, despite the fact that
if other people are willing to hire Irish people, and yes,
yeah, if other people are willing to hire Irish people at a similar competitive rate, but regardless, we're still keeping a certain group of people or a minority out of the workforce, and that's overall a problem.
Oh, no, we're not.
And helping them raise them. Okay, I'm using the historical example here and why this would be a problem in the market. So if there were certain people or individual actors saying, no, we cannot hire Irish people, we're not doing that. That would be a problem for that specific minority group in and of itself, in order to raise themselves with, whatever economic mobility you want to talk about. That may not be a problem for people competing in the marketplace. They can both be driven by their hate and still have equitable profits. So I fail to understand this. How would they have less profits if they refuse to hire an individual Irish person based on the
because there's options that they're not taking advantage of that the people who don't discriminate.
So if people have similar
people who don't discriminate are more efficient, more profitable, and thus will survive.
That's absolutely not the case. Plus, individual actors
in the market are irrational. No, in theory and in practice.
Well, then show me an example.
Show me an example.
I just explained to you why, in theory, not hiring an individual Irish person can still keep profits the same. If people are discriminating against Irish people, they can hire another actor within the society who is of a preferable race, but that will still lead to a more negative consequence for the individual Irish person who exists in that society.
The business that is willing to hire Irish people has more options for hiring, which means that they're going to get better labor for cheap, right? More options means more.
How does that automatically interpret as better labor? Because if you're a corporation,
If you have more options, you're going
you
to
have more
bigger
entities.
hiring
Wait,
pool.
but if you have a hiring pool that is of equitable size, you can still get considerable labor to keep the profit margins as high as they already were. Especially when you already have, especially when you already have an initial investment in capital, large enough stake in the market to control a certain market share. Then it really matters not who you hire, as long as they're able to produce a similar level of economic output.
It absolutely does.
The more
matter.
people you can choose from, the better choices you're going to be able to
So
make.
if I'm Walmart, okay,
sometimes
so
the best person for the job is going to be Irish, and if the people who will hire those people are going to do better than the people who say, I'm not going to hire the best person for the job, I'm going to hire the second best because they're Irish, right?
So it
There's
sounds
gonna be
like to
enough
me
of that.
what's happening here is we're failing to take into
It's a
account how the actual
meritocracy
market
argument.
works. Yeah, the meritocracy.
That is how an
argument-
actual market works.
No, the
That's
meritocracy
how the
does
free
not
market
compete on the.
works,
Yeah,
yes.
the free market. Okay, so what I'm trying to get at is the meritocracy doesn't account for the already existing initial capital investments in the market today. So when you're Walmart and you refuse to hire an Irish person and you still get the second best person for the job, you're still going to be able, especially with the wages or comparable wages to what you'd be paying them now, which is a relatively low wage, because that's what you pay the guy who puts the boxes on the shelf. I'm one of those guys, okay?
You're going to
You're
lose
still going
money
to have
because
you're going to have a
because
similar
you're
level of
unwilling
economic
to hire
output
Irish
because
people. You will
you're-
lose some amount of money. You may
you
not
will lose
lose
a very
everything, but
marginal
you're going to
amount
lose money.
Yeah,
And
so if you lose a marginal
businesses
amount of a
don't want to lose money.
So if you lose a marginal amount of a market share, does that mean that's going to deteriorate your standing in the market to a considerable enough degree in which you won't hold a similar level of share over that market? Because it sounds like to me
you'll make
you will
less
be
money,
less.
you'll be less profitable.
Do you think
It
you'll be
may not- you may
substantially
not
less on
instantly
your refusal to
cease to
hire
exist,
Irish people?
But the point is, there is a cost to the irrational discrimination.
Yeah, there is a cost to the irrational discrimination, not enough of which will actually make people not.
Show me an example where
Okay,
that wasn't
okay.
enough.
All right, so
Show me an example.
Katie, Ty.
I am trying. Wait, I need to respond to
yeah,
last
Katie-
username because he said something dumb there, so I have to respond.
Katie, Ty, I think takes Wick.
Last username. I want to ask you like a couple
Ruben,
of
with your
questions.
hand up, like you were just like it's just I couldn't tell. All right, well you're on list too.
I want to ask you like a few questions, and I'm gonna start very basic because I think it's like, okay, when we're saying solve the problem, there's a problem. What is the problem? Like for you personally, is discrimination a problem? Is a black person not being allowed into a business a problem that you're interested in solving?
Or me?
Yes.
I would let black people in my business, and I would be
No.
annoyed at businesses that didn't do that.
That's not what I asked. I asked if there's an issue with black people not being allowed into businesses on like a national scale. Do you see that as a problem that either the market or the government, we can discuss solutions later, but do you see that as a problem needs fixing?
Yes.
Okay. And then you're saying that your solution is letting the market handle it. And you believe that the market will solve that problem.
I'm saying that the market can do better at solving that problem than any political process.
Okay.
Yes.
Do we
Right?
agree
There's no
that
reason
first
to
of all the
expect
market
political
wouldn't?
process to do better at solving that problem than the market can.
I think laws that forbid something would probably
But those
do
laws
better
need to be
than-
created by a government. The government does what gets them elected, which means they're going to do what's popular. And so if discrimination is super popular, then the government's going to give you racist laws, or they're not going to give you laws that prevent racism.
So I'm gonna
right?
ask
So
if
you're
the
always going to do better with the
population-
market solution than with the political solution.
Okay, I'm not arguing yet because I'm trying to first understand your position. If the population is fine with black people not being serviced, like on a large scale, is that still a problem for you?
I would not like that.
Do you think that should be a problem for the country? Or do you think the country
Well,
should
you're
just
stipulating that
exact the
it's
will
not.
of the people?
I mean, you're saying that the country wants it that way, right?
Why did I say that? I'm just asking a question.
I thought that's what you were
It's just-
stipulating. You're saying if it's popular to discriminate against black people, I would consider that bad. But obviously, the country doesn't consider that bad mostly because they want it. That's what you said, right?
Well, I don't. When I say the country, there's like the people of the country, and that you seem to make a distinction between the government and the people, and you'll just say that the government will do whatever the people are saying. So
Generally,
to like
disagree, but
to pull
Pop
this
off.
to a very like just to crystallize this. So if the people of the United States wanted slavery back, slavery will be reinstalled?
If they did, the government, yes, but they need the government's help to do it.
Okay,
I mean, you know what?
but you said that the
You understand-
government
you
would
understand
do
my
what's
answer?
going to get them elected.
Yeah.
Okay.
If slavery was popular, then I'd say it's not, even if it was popular, the only way you'd get it back is with the government creating the laws to institutionalize it, which they might do, I guess, if it was popular enough and it got them reelected.
But I mean,
If it wasn't for the government doing that, I don't think it would come back, even if it was popular.
Isn't
because
it
it
great
would-
though that
So,
laws
a
The
create
market would
social
fight back
standards?
against it.
Keep going, Katie.
So a popularity from the people would then cause the government to try to make that more popular, and then it's like a circular
No,
thing?
they don't have to. They don't have to make it more popular. You're saying it's already popular. The government
Yes.
would pass laws to make it happen, right?
Okay. So
Is that
if people
controversial?
today generally support not discriminating protected classes, as in like not letting business owners to refuse service, and that's
Yeah.
the will of most of the people, then what's
Right.
the issue with the government codifying that into law?
Well, the issue is that it's not necessary. The question is whether it's necessary or not. I don't think it's causing a lot of harm. But the question is, can you generally expect the government to do better at preventing discrimination than markets? And my answer is no. The markets will generally do a better job at that. Because
Okay,
the problem with
but
governments
you
is
think
they
it's
might
not
they might
harmful
make
and you
good
don't have
laws.
an issue with it.
You
You
know
just
what's-
think the market could do better.
You know what's funny with this though is that creating
hold on,
laws
sorry,
in the government.
Let me answer your
We got a
question.
bunch of people we got to get
got-
to. We got a
I-
bunch of people got to get to. So
I mean, if there's a line of dialogue
what you
here,
want, which is to prevent irrational discrimination that's not for any good reason, like discriminating against races and stuff. That the market is a much better way generally to accomplish that. The market will do that if you just let it do its thing.
Okay, but you said you don't have an issue with the government like enforcing that if that's
Whereas
the will
the
of people.
government might sometimes pass laws that do that, but they might sometimes pass laws that do the opposite, that actually protect that kind of discrimination, as they have many times before. So generally speaking, if you're going to trust one mechanism or the other to prevent discrimination, it's markets that you want.
Okay.
oh man, I'm
Okay.
gonna
okay,
scream.
shut up. Screaming silently. Let's go to Tiberius.
No, Ty, we can't hear you, buddy.
Ah, damn, I didn't mute the wrong one. Excuse me, unmute the wrong one. I apologize. Anyway, LU, I love you, and I love that you're going like 1v7 against the panel. Unfortunately, I have to add on to that, but I do want to take this a different way because, I do econ, so all that stuff. I think you're largely right, and I pulled up some figures in the regards that the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, these are the people that actually prosecute like the Title IX and Title VII lawsuits for protected classes. The number's going down almost year on year. So there is a general trend line down. However, that's actually
Wait, what's going down?
The number of lawsuits that are done on behalf of protected classes. That is going down. So if to kind of like stealing your argument to some degree is that the market is maybe making things better. Maybe it's not. I guess that's a big litmus test conversation. But here's the real one: is that we still have those interactions, right? So would you just say let the market handle it, and you're just going to have like the occasional offlier? Or is this something that we want to codify in the law because we do believe that it is a moral standard? I know you're an anarchist. I get that, but it's also like, what do you do about the 400 cases that were filed back in 1997, as an example?
400 in all of America?
Yeah, actually, it's not that high. In fact, in 2020, it was 97.
Okay, so that seems pretty low to me in a country with 330 million people and I don't know, like couple million businesses or whatever, to have only have those laws and only 100 lawsuits. Considering people are always looking for reasons to sue, even if it's not necessarily a big problem for them. I'd say that the problem of discrimination, one way or another, by businesses is pretty much a solved problem at this point. Now we can debate about whether it's solved because of proactive laws or because of market forces. I guess it's hard to tell because we have those laws. I don't think.
How
those
is
laws
that
are
an
necessary.
argument for the market?
Gotta keep pushing. Ty.
Well, it's
No, LU.
The problem is those laws came in at the
Hey,
same time that we got rid of the laws that were protecting discrimination. So was it the protection laws or getting rid of the racist laws that fixed it? I don't know.
Yeah, I gotta say really quick,
Well,
LU,
that's
you
your turn
are
anyway.
LU, you aren't 1v7 in this because I'm here, right here beside you, brother. Because in Tiberius, I think you brought a great stat to the playing field. It's like it feels like the market and society is slowly progressing itself towards weeding out discrimination without having to have government incursion into these private
Look at
businesses,
the
right?
consequences
bullshit.
when
What
it's
are you
even
talking about?
when a big business is even like accused of being slightly discriminatory against anyone. Like look at the massive fucking public outcry and shitstorm that happens. They like shut down. Like what did Starbucks do? Shut down like their whole company for a day and give everyone like
Starbucks
Two
Anti-racist
kids,
training.
two
fine.
black kids,
Don't worry
two
about
black kids got
Starbucks.
arrested
Yeah.
in their lobby. Yeah.
Like
I
it's
remember.
so insanely unpopular to do that. Like the idea that if we got rid of the Civil Rights Act, that all these businesses would be like, yeah, let's be racist, no blacks allowed. Like I don't.
Okay,
think
you
so.
guys are focusing too
Okay.
much on black people here. I think because the
So,
gay
huh,
marriage was.
I got it.
Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
sorry. It's got to be
Alright, go on.
Wick, Roadman, then Doobie, then Dylan.
Okay, so it's my turn, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I just want to really push back against it. And when we talk about bringing lawsuits up to this, these are the only ones with concrete proof. These cases are notoriously hard to prove. The bar to prove this in a court of law is very, very high. And so to assume that simply because in a certain period of time there was only 97 lawsuits that went forward, that there were only 97 instances of discrimination, I think is faulty logic. Secondly, the market absolutely has one motive and one motive only: profit. And in certain cases, in certain communities, in certain times, it absolutely makes sense. For again, they're being rational actors because that is their incentive. That if there is a profit motive to discriminate, they will do so, and that has been the case throughout history. And also not just discrimination,
Well,
but in
what
causing harm in
situation
general.
has-
Let me give you the
Describe a
example.
situation where it's
Okay.
more profitable to
No,
discriminate.
Exactly. So, for example, if you have a company and your clientele is mostly racist, they mostly do not like to see black faces. Let's look at China as a good example of this. They actively discriminate against putting black actors and black faces on their posters. They know it doesn't sell there, and so they do it. This is how they act. And so if you have a clientele that if your market niche caters to people who do not like to see black people, it makes very much sense not to have them on staff. That is a profit motive to discriminate. That has happened. That happens. And just because now, in the current period of time we are in, let me finish. The current period of time we are in, it is not economically viable to discriminate, which I'll agree that it is. In 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years, that might change. And that's where the government has a role, to provide protections, to provide just in case in the future we can ensure that our
the
citizens
Chinese
are
government done that?
protected from these.
Do you show me an example where that kind of racism was ubiquitous, like China, and the government came in and said, "Stop it, everyone! Stop being racist, everyone!" and use their legislative power to prevent it?
Can you repeat this?
Like I said, I didn't say that it was impossible to have racism
Certainly.
in a market. I just said that solving the problem the markets are always going to be better at solving the problem than the political process.
That's not
right?
true.
So show me an
That's not
example
true.
where
Show me an example where that is true, please.
America.
Again, that's the opposite of true. Look at.
How dare you say that's the opposite of true? We just proved to you that that is true.
America had racist laws.
We had racist laws. We were a racist country. We have progressed
America
ourselves.
You're
It's
still
not
a
a-
racist country.
Isn't
Hey,
it
Wick,
wait,
Wick,
isn't
Wick.
it crazy? Isn't it crazy how we change the laws and those set a precedent or a social standard, and then the country by proxy has been influenced to be a more progressive nation as a result? It could just be me. But I personally find it funny that when you have a massive bill put in place to protect classes within a nation, the nation suddenly gets more progressive.
It
Magical.
didn't suddenly get more progressive. You
It
think that bill was
absolutely did.
unpopular when it was passed?
It was
You
unpopular
think it didn't
when
have
it was
popular support?
No, they had-
How
no,
do
they
you
had
think
troops.
it was
How do you expect a bill to get passed if
How do you
if
think it
nobody
was
likes
passed, Dylan?
Yeah,
It had to go through the fucking legislative process.
Last
yeah, it went
username.
through the
You guys are
legislative
the ones who believe in
process and dealt with
democracy.
300 people. Yeah,
They
isn't
had
it
to bring in
crazy
the
how-
troops to the South to enforce integration.
The South was a
They had to bring in
minority
the
of our
troops to use
fucking.
force to make it happen.
Yeah, so I think it's really cool that we have a representative democracy that enacts, might not be the overarching will of the people when they want to make bad decisions, like not letting black people into their school. And then we set a social standard, which the rest of the country continues
But
to
they didn't-
adhere to after the fact.
If the whole country was like that, there's no way they would have passed the Civil Rights Act, right? It was
So-
only because
But
the country as a whole was
not all
was
companies
majority
are
in favor of
national.
the
Yeah,
of the
so
act.
there's
Companies
areas.
are very local. Companies can be very local, mom and pop stores
Yeah.
and things like that. And it can hurt things at a local level, and it can be very profitable at a local level. Now, when
Sure.
it comes out to making things to scale, okay, that goes away. But again, you act as if these companies have infinite hiring resources, infinite slots to hire. No, they only need to fill so many slots, and once they
Never said
build
that.
that, they're fine. There are more people who want jobs than there are jobs.
Yes, but the more choice you have about who like one worker is not the same as another. Right?
There's a limit on that though. That doesn't scale infinitely. There is a limit on that where it doesn't matter if it's minutely better. There is no cost involved.
Which I literally said
At
when I
some point,
addressed the.
but in
which
some
I-
cases
I-
there are. So
It's
So-
crazy
where you
how
are.
I.
So-
it's
so-
crazy
so-
how I
money to
addressed
be-
that when I
so-
said that there was a
yeah.
share of the market controlled.
Sure.
By-
Roadman and then Doobie, then Dylan.
So Wick, I just gotta ask, like, I feel like you're so into the weeds of this whole thing. Like, do you understand, like, if a business is fucking doesn't serve black people, they're not gonna be in business. You understand what I'm saying?
That's not true at all.
That's
Why
not
would it?
true. Why
Exactly.
would
No, if you
why
are
would you
if you
make
live
this
if you
up?
live in
This is
Utah.
so weird.
Okay, let me give you an
Okay.
example, Roman, so you can understand. If you live
Oh
in
my
Utah,
God.
let me give you an example so you may understand. If you live in Utah, your clientele is going to be astronomically white, and you can stay in business and not serve a single black person. You can say we don't serve black people if there was no laws in place against this. So you say we don't serve black people, and you can make just as much money. Just as much money. There is no actual cost here in a lot of cases. And that's why the government has a responsibility to step in my opinion.
What do you mean the government? Okay, so the government steps in, right? Let's say there's just some fucking ho-dunk town down in fucking Alabama where they're like, oh, it's all a bunch of white people and they don't want to serve this one black guy who lives there, this fucking fantasy land that you're creating. So then all of a sudden, the government steps in and goes, listen, guys, you have to serve this one black guy. And they're going to do this whole big thing to make sure that this one black guy can buy a fucking bag of Doritos at the store, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
So like this whole thing that we're going through, do you think that the government being involved is going to make this process any better whatsoever? He's just going to go in the store, he's going to get the chips, and then he's going out and everything's okay? Like the government
I think
being
that
involved,
over time
It's
it will.
better than him not being allowed into the store. This is your own. You took this theoretical thing forward. So in one case, the guy doesn't get service, and in the other case, he does get service. Nobody said that racism is solved.
You've
It's
created
just,
this.
Doritos doesn't have them.
You've created this world where there's this one dude who can't get Doritos.
There are
because
definitely
all these white people are fucking racist. Like it's a fucking 1920s. Like in this day and age, if you have a business and you're selling.
Rules. Because we have laws that prevent it.
You know what?
When we did
they
not.
set a social standard.
Have you ever run a business? Have you ever been in business? Have you ever run a
Wait,
fucking
wait.
business?
We are talking about protected class, right? So let's. Racism is not a problem. Let's use the prompt that Prime gave. Gay people coming to get a cake. Okay. That person did not lose their fucking business because they did not want to make that wedding cake. Okay? To say that people are not rewarded for being discriminatory is fucking bullshit. We don't need to use black people for that.
They did lose business. What are you talking
Okay,
about? They
so
lost
if
one
they
case.
A ton of business. They may not have gone out of business, but nobody said that
Wait,
that gay
customers.
couple couldn't go to another
Yes,
bakery.
They're losing customers.
Wait.
You don't understand.
lost
If
customers.
they're losing customers.
They
that
went
doesn't
to
change
another bakery. The other
losing
bakery got their
customers?
business.
Open your
They're
own
losing
bakery.
customers does not change
Sorry,
the fact.
Katie. Sorry.
What? About
They
what?
went to another bakery.
That
They
has
went to
nothing
another
do
bakery
with the
that
argument
wasn't
we're making.
discriminating against them.
Just open-
Yes, it
That has nothing to
Open
do
your
with
own.
the point.
it
Open your
makes
own.
the point of the open market,
very
the free
rural areas,
market. What are
The
you
point of
talking
the
very
about?
open
rural
market
areas,
is
in
that you
very-
have a store now who's unwilling, that is discriminatory, and they did not go out of business, meaning they will continue to discriminate.
didn't.
Maybe they
Open
will
your
have
own
less.
store.
The question is
Open
not,
your own store.
Katie, the question is not, did they go out of business? It is, did they lose business?
Not
did
to a
they
significant
lose
That's the
degree.
money?
stupidest question
Not to
you're
a
asking.
significant
That
degree.
is so stupid. Oh
Great.
my god.
Good job.
Why is it
Good
okay.
job.
Why is it
How is
stupid?
it
real
Okay, look,
stupid?
Why is
you know what, guys?
Explain.
You're right.
Alright.
Wick and Katie,
This
you're
is
right.
bullshit.
You're right. Not every business who discriminates is guaranteed to go out of business. And I'm not claiming that. I'm just saying
So
that
how does that solve them
generally
discriminating?
speaking, the market solves this problem better than the political process. We have theoretical basis for that argument, and we have an
demonstrated how
empirical
that's not
basis
But you
for that
just
argument.
admitted it doesn't
Historically,
solve the problem.
the state has
Them
made
losing
plenty of
profit
laws
does
that
not
actually
solve the problem.
protected discrimination. Yes, it does. It solves the problem better than democratic politics.
It has not even
It
once.
How to solve the problem
doesn't,
beyond that?
You're
I don't
just
know. We can talk
making
about
this
that.
up.
But that's not the question. The question is, what solves the problem better, markets or politics?
But you just
Free
admitted
markets.
it doesn't solve the problem. So can you explain to me how your
Yes,
free
I did.
market idea is
I'm just
solving
saying it
the
solves the
problem?
problem better. Okay. It does
Remember,
better.
his
It's not
response
just
was
black or white, right?
America,
It's not the problem
so-
exists or it doesn't, right? We can solve the
so
problem to
neither
various
solve
degrees.
the problem. One is just slightly worse than the other. Okay, I'm interested in actually
Sure.
solving
Yes,
the problem.
exactly.
Okay.
How does the government solve
If
the
you have
problem?
an idea how
That's
to
my
do
question.
that, that's great. I don't know
How
how
is the
you could
government
guarantee
solving the
that is
problem?
100% impossible for anyone to discriminate ever, right?
Yeah, because
Allowing the
that's
government
what
to
that
do
means.
that-
If there's a national
Well,
problem
what do
with
you mean? That's what solving the problem
anyone
perfectly
being
means, isn't it?
discriminated ever is the goal that we're
Well,
trying
what
to
do you mean then when you said you want to solve the problem?
If I give the
Katie, you
example
are
of the gay, can I answer, please? And then I'll fight with you. We'll yell at each other. It'll be fine. If we're giving the example of this person refusing the gay customers, and they do not go out of business, because why the fuck would they? That means that they are entitled and will continue to, because they did it out of like personal motives, to discriminate. So this business that we want to not discriminate is still discriminating because we're not forbidding them from doing so.
But how are you going to forbid them? What are you going to do? How are you going to
Katie.
stop them?
Katie,
What
if
do
you
you
can
mean?
never,
Force them to cater.
Katie, if you can never eliminate all the discrimination, then it feels like by your standard, it would be like there's no use in doing it by your standard. I'm not
Please
saying this.
explain to me how them losing money is. I'm not saying okay. Don't
Because-
eliminate all discrimination. Don't poof racism away. No, don't poof like homophobia away. But them losing profit is. What is it on the scale of removing discrimination? Is that like 10%? They are still going to discriminate. They have no
Yeah,
reason
they
not
will.
to.
So what do you want it to do about it?
Then what do you do?
You
Well, you
can't
tell me.
stop that. That's who they
Let-
are. That's
let
them
me-
as a
let
person.
you-
What do you mean?
let me
It
give you an
literally
example.
can't stop that.
Here, let
I
me
can
give you an
make them
example.
pay.
How?
Can
Can I give you another
Hey,
example?
the way you stop that is you strip their fucking business license. Simple, easy.
Oh my
Hey,
God.
you
Here,
were discriminating against these people. You can no
How do you-
longer
how do
do
you do
business
that?
in the city or in the
How do you
city.
do that?
Really
How do you
cute.
do that?
Really
What do you mean,
cute.
how do you
It's
do
really
that?
It's Stimpy's turn
cute.
anyway.
How
So,
do you do that?
shut up. It's
Is there a
Stimpy's
button that
turns
does that
anyway. All
somewhere?
right, and then we'll go to Dylan and then Ty.
Okay,
Wait, is it
so
my turn, or-
saying that you can't get rid of all discrimination, therefore none of these laws should exist, is really stupid argument. Okay, the way that you do this is if discrimination is proven, right, you strip away their business license. Very straightforward.
How do
very
you get
simple.
these laws?
They can
in
no
place in
longer
the
do
first
business
place
in the
against
the way that
discrimination?
they're in place right
said-
fucking now, where the federal government comes in and says, "Hey, you no longer get to do
generally
this thing
You just
that
said
you can do in
prove
these states."
discrimination.
Hold on. So please, it's not that difficult to prove discrimination. Okay, it happens all
Okay,
the fucking
yes,
time.
I
and
agree
it-
with
Very
you.
difficult.
Okay, so
Yes,
please
then
stop
when you
interrupting.
do-
Control your impulses for 2 seconds. If you let your takes bake for a little bit, right? They wouldn't be half baked. Okay, let them bake. Keep them in
That's
the oven and wait for me to
adorable.
finish.
This is adorable.
Please, please. Okay, so you guys are speaking. First off, I really have a problem with you guys only talking about like black people, right? In this, right? Black people aren't the only discriminated group in this country, or the only like press group, quote unquote, right? Gay marriage was illegal in the United States, right? In I think like 13 states it was illegal. In the states where it was legal, right? Most of those states it was legal because the court forced it on the population, right? California voted against gay marriage in 2007 up until 2015, 7 fucking years ago. There are 13 states across this fucking country where if you were gay, you could not get married, right? It was okay for these businesses, whether they're private churches or the Catholic Church, whatever the fuck it is, right? It was totally okay for them to discriminate against you because you're gay, right? So that didn't change because of a market or because of the democracy, right? What happened is the government had to come in and these places and say, hey, no, you don't get to do this anymore. We've decided the culture is shifting away from that.
Those were all federal.
The only thing
that was all federal jurisdiction, not private businesses.
No,
please,
what changed was that the government started recognizing
Shut the fuck up, Doobie. Shut the fuck up. You've been going on for 20 minutes.
This is why.
What are you
talking
about?
This is why. I've barely spoken.
Just started talking.
The Civil Rights Act does apply to the states. It applies to state and local businesses too, right? So I'm sorry if this is like news to you. Arizona can't tomorrow say, hey, it's okay for you guys to say that you're not going to hire black people anymore. The federal government would come in, say, hey, no, actually, this is against the law here, federal law, which trumps state law, and you don't get to fucking do that, right?
Why didn't they do that?
I don't think, right? This is so much a problem with black people in the United States anymore because the culture has shifted because it was forced to shift by the federal government, right? But this is definitely could still be a problem with trans people, non-binary people, gay people. It absolutely could be a problem. It is a problem currently. We're having these discussions currently. Many of these states currently are trying to make it illegal for trans women to go in like women's restrooms, right? So like these are issues that we're still facing. Don't pretend that discrimination is a thing of the past.
I did
You're
not
making
say,
an argument for why the government doesn't solve these problems, okay?
It did. It absolutely
really
did.
not.
So what made gay marriage legal is that the government started recognizing that gay marriages were actually legally married, right? If the government didn't even get involved in that, didn't say whether someone was married or not, then they could have get married ages ago, right? It wasn't hard to find some place that would do a ceremony and marry two gay people. What was hard is getting the government to actually recognize that marriage legally, right? That's what had to change, and the reason it held on for as long as it did until just recently is because of the government protecting the discrimination
of the government. Right? It's because the populations, the voter base in these places wanted these discriminatory policies.
Right.
And
until it
within
became popular,
democracy,
the government didn't.
This was the case, right?
Government was happy to discriminate until
no, it's not
discrimination
true.
was unpopular.
Gay marriage was not extremely popular all over the country when they undid the gay marriage bans. Right? This was still a hotly contested issue in a lot of the fucking United States. Again, I just told you, in 2007, California, progressive libcock California voted down gay marriage. Right? In 2007, this was not an accepted, settled debate. Right? It was not.
Exactly.
Right? So the reason it is now,
making my point.
the reason it is now,
the
is
government
because the
allowed
federal
the
government
popular
came
race-
in
popular
and said, you
discrimination
no
to
longer
become
get to do these things,
institutionalized.
Mr. Market,
They
Mr.
enforced the popular
Individualist,
discrimination.
Mr. Catholic Church. You no longer get to do these things. We're going to force you to do the other thing. And if you don't, you no longer get to practice in our states. Right?
You're making my point, Doobie.
This is
If the discrimination is popular,
the nation,
will
the
continue and the
government
government will
absolutely
protect it.
has an interest in shifting the culture, forming the culture, developing the culture.
But
And I
they
think
didn't.
that's
They waited
exactly
for the
what
culture to
they're
shift
doing.
itself
That's what
and then
they're
just went along
doing.
with it.
No, that's
They
not
just follow what the
true.
culture does.
Hold on. When the Civil Rights Act was passed, do you think if they took a vote across the United States, civil rights would have won popular support across this country?
Yes.
What makes you think that? What the fuck makes you think that? Especially given
elected
that-
representatives who voted for
especially
the
given
act.
that
There's just
in
one
states
step
where they had
to
Jim
voting
Crow
rules.
laws, these are still extremely racist states that are still racist today. And at the time when the Civil Rights Act was passed, they would not have voted in favor of giving black people rights, any kind of rights. So I don't know why you'd assume.
And maybe
that they
individual
would.
states wouldn't, but the country as a whole?
Okay,
Yeah,
so the
but
federal government had to come in and stop what the individual states were doing, stop what the market in these areas was doing.
Are you saying the federal government changed the sentiment of the country as a whole? They took something that was unpopular and forced it to be popular through laws.
I'm saying that this is the cultural shift.
That's crazy.
That was
That's
it's
absurd.
not. It's
I mean,
not crazy. at all.
there must be numbers.
Exactly what
There must
happened
be
with
poll,
Civil
opinion
Rights Act.
polls from the
Exactly
time.
what happened with gay marriage. This is the government forces the
can I
culture
give my
movement a certain
example?
way all the
Okay,
fucking
no,
time.
you can't. Ty's next, then you, and then Wick.
I swear you said I was after.
No,
Doobie, but
I know you
whatever.
did. I know you thought so. But Wick, Ty,
You did
excuse
say
me.
that. Rewind the VOD.
I don't
Appreciate
care.
it.
Shut up, please. Thank you. Ty.
Y'all can hear me, right?
Yep.
Yep, sorry, having sound issues today. Anyway, so like, I think there's some actually good arguments on both sides here, but I want to split hairs. So LU government is reacting to what is popular. Business largely reacts to what is profitable, right? We can agree that these are two different metrics, right? That they can lead to different outcomes. And then I hope that I can put another affirmative here that bigotry is not always rational, right? Can we agree to all these three things real quick?
Bigotry is not always rational.
Yes.
Yes, I mean, in the sense that bigotry will not always. Bigotry will cost you money. It's inefficient.
Yes, it's inefficient. It's not rational. And then government reacts to what is popular, and business reacts to what is profitable. Right. So those are two different modus operandi. They are two things that lead to. Okay, so we're on the same page. What I'm going to put to you is that largely you can use government as a check because it is an empowerment of enforcers, and enforcers can have a particular leaning. So if you say that the South actually, it was still popular to be racist today, but you had Northern enforcers come in who actually thought that, slavery was a terrible thing to enforce this policy, can you affect a social change? And I would like to think that the history actually shows that we've done this multiple times. As an example, during the 1870s in the United States, the northern states sent the National Guard in to beat up the KKK, and we almost destroyed them as a functional entity. Unfortunately, there was some politics that came up that didn't let us do that. In the 1960s, we sent in the National Guard to desegregate schools. I am going to make the argument to you, sir, that government can, if you empower the correct people, have dramatically different results based upon what is popular versus what is profitable.
What you're talking about is the national government going in and forcibly ending a racist or discriminatory policy of a more local government, right?
Yes.
You're not talking about them fixing some market problem. You're talking about fixing some government problem, right? Discrimination, segregated schools, those are publicly funded schools, right? Slavery, this was an institution that was subsidized by the government, right? It was the government who would actually public police who would actually enforce slavery laws.
So I agree with you on this. So let me narrow this down, right? And I want to bring it back to the conversation that I feel like we didn't finish out, was that of the 97 discrimination suits that were filed back in 2000, right? If that is not a concern to you, if you think that that's just an acceptable margin of error, I don't agree with it, but I appreciate it. I can take that argument. But if
that strikes me as a pretty low number.
It does strike me as a pretty low number too, but that's not what I'm concerned with. What I'm concerned with is that I do believe in legislation based upon moral axioms, and I do not believe that even one of these is moral. So I feel that I want to empower people.
Neither do I.
Okay, that's fine.
But the question is, can we count on the government to generally make moral laws? I don't see why. I don't see why we count on the government to do that any more than the market.
I know we agree and we disagree here on the meta ethics here. Is that the popularity?
It's not really meta ethics. It's just
it's not meta ethics.
Okay, well I feel like it is. But anyway,
the thing is, the market can make something unpopular happen if it's more efficient.
Right.
Whereas the government can't do that. The government just cares about the popularity. And because bigotry is inefficient, the market at least has the potential to get rid of bigotry even if it's popular. Because it's inefficient, you see?
Okay. Can popularity counteract what is profitable though too? Right? Does this go?
If you have a state to intervene and prevent the efficiency from winning.
Okay. There was a different way I wanted to go about this, but I love you. Thank you for entangling with me on that
Love
one.
you too.
So let's go to Dylan and then Wick.
Thank you. I just wanted to talk about really quickly, and there was one serious market failure in Canada here, and this is a little closer to home to me, but there was a problem where within the marketplace in the retirement and elderly living communities, they were actually denying entry to certain groups of the indigenous populations in southwestern Ontario and parts of Manitoba. And so eventually that only stopped, that was typically viewed as a market failure on the front that the owners of these larger corporations, the ones that were providing the retirement housing to these people, were boomers. They're not boomers, obviously, because it's like 30 years ago. So they were way older than that. But they were, older people, 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever. CEOs of these retirement and like group living communities for the elderly, and they were actively discriminating against Canada's Indigenous population, only because of efforts from the Canadian government to find housing for these Indigenous peoples. Were they able to actually find homes? Because these companies own such large shares in the market, in the retirement home and group living market, where there was about maybe 4 or 5 communities, and now it's very difficult for families to drive out of their small rural communities where there's only 1 or 2 retirement homes to visit their elderly relatives. So this turned into a huge problem for a while, where families either A, did not have the option to have their family, their elderly relatives live near them, or B, they would have to drive out of county hours to visit their relatives, which was also a problem on the front because now we have a failure of the market to address the needs for socialization of the elderly members of our communities. So how would you go about addressing something like that has such a short, or it's just a small niche market with a few select companies that have such a large market share, where there's only a group of these homes that live or that exist within smaller communities, especially rural ones when we're talking about the prairie regions of Canada. So we're talking out west typically.
Well, you're asking me how I would address this specific problem. I don't know. I'd have to know more about the problem, but doesn't seem to be the question at hand here. Like the question is,
it does deal with
do we generally
discrimination
expect the
against an
government
elderly
to solve
demographic
that problem?
Yes,
better
they
than
did
markets?
actually. Yeah, they actually.
So let me
did,
ask you: do you
considering
think that the Canadian government generally is good at solving problems with the Indigenous population?
In the example I just provided you, they actually did assist in getting these.
Do you think they're
people
generally
housed.
good at making they've
Historically,
been generally good
no,
at
but with
protecting
this
the Indigenous
specific
population.
example
Okay.
regarding a market failure, as a matter of
Okay.
fact, they did assist this.
So to
They
the
did exist
question
this
of can we
demographic.
generally expect governments to do better at protecting minorities than markets, it seems that you would side with markets because you're just saying
I told you an
government
example
generally
where the
doesn't.
government. It's
You
almost
gave
like they
one
work in
example.
tandem, right? It's almost like
You
they
gave
work
one
in tandem.
example.
It's crazy.
We're talking
It's
about
crazy.
generally.
Yeah, and I gave you an example in
Like
which
I can cherry pick examples
dozens-
where the
I
government
gave
did
you
bad
an-
things,
yeah.
right? Like we just
So
I'm just
you
gonna
asked
list
me to
like
provide you an example earlier, and now you're scared of the fact that I provided you a real example. I don't know
I
what
asked
you
you
want me to
provide
do
me an
because now
example
you're
that shows
pivoting.
that the market
So you're
did
doing
worse
this
than the
great,
government.
great job of pivoting off the fact that I provided you a valid point, a historically accurate point, in which the government intervened in the market and assisted these indigenous populations of people in finding housing relatively
Okay, so you're
close to
saying
their
that in this
relatives to ensure
particular
that they were social.
situation,
Yes, in this particular
the
situation.
market-
You asked me to list one, so I gave you one. Here it is, right in front of you.
You know what?
A
I'll
la
look into
mode.
it.
Okay,
I'll have to
perfect.
look into the details of this,
Thank
but
you.
I'll look into
Yeah,
it.
sounds great. Peachy keen.
You may have found
Problem
the
solved.
very first example I've ever seen of that.
Wait,
Yeah,
Kaylee.
I'm a cool guy. What can I say? I'm special.
So that was a very good example, but I want to challenge this assertion that has been made several times that bigotry is necessarily inefficient. The problem with thinking that markets will solve racism or discrimination or prejudice of any kind is that it's not a market problem. This doesn't really affect markets in such a way where they feel that they have to adjust. It just doesn't work out like that. And we can see this throughout history that what's profitable tends to be what's more harmful in a lot of cases. For example, child labor was a big thing, the robber barons of the 1800s and things like that. Slavery is another classic example where it was extremely profitable.
Slavery is
for
really
the
inefficient.
things.
Slavery is terribly inefficient.
And yet
It
made
was
them
only
a lot
government
of money.
subsidizing
It made-
slavery that made it sustainable.
It made a
right?
lot of money for these people because
With the
they had
government's
the
help.
financial
Because government
market
socialized the
incentive.
cost of slavery. right?
You're putting the cart before the horse here, because they had the market incentive to increase their profits, and therefore they used their influence on the government to try to enshrine that.
Okay, so don't
And
let the
that-
government do that.
The government is not perfect, but the government is the only entity capable of really addressing problems of systemic racism, systemic discrimination, and discriminate prejudice. Gay marriage wasn't legislated into
They're also the
legality.
one-
It was
seem
used
uniquely
through the
capable
courts
of
and the
causing them.
government. These things happen, and we can definitely influence. The government has a power.
Why
to
talk about
influence
what the
its
government's
population.
capable of instead of talking about what it actually does? Government's capable of good things. It's capable of bad things. What does it actually do? Right?
It tend to
Government
overall
is
it
capable of
depends on the
ending
government.
slavery.
If the government
It's
is
also
good,
capable of causing slavery. And
Certainly.
historically, it caused slavery.
and
okay?
it ended
So-
it as well. And it
It's by
ended it
stop-
as well.
by
The
ceasing
markets
to
didn't
cause
do
it.
that
Why,
shit.
why couldn't you say that
The
the
markets
market
didn't
caused
do that shit.
slavery?
The markets did
arguably
cause
they did.
Yeah.
Arguably, it was, you know, the,
Okay,
the
then why would
states
you?
that didn't have slavery were more efficient. Imagine the cost of
This is just
slavery if the government
ahistorical.
wasn't
Yeah,
helping
that's
you
just
to
ahistorical.
enslave people.
That's literally disanalogous considering the like lower population demographics of the South and the lack of industrialization at comparable rates to the North. So I feel
You know what?
like you're
Fine.
just
Let me
offering
explain why
you're
slavery
offering
is
me
less
a
efficient without and why it's unsustainable. Without
Okay, but the
government
example we just
subsidization.
talked about
Wait,
in
let-
regards
let
to
him- let
American
him explain
chattel
it, though.
slavery. is
So
historically
imagine
accurate.
trying to keep slaves without having the police willing to go and enforce your ownership over slaves, right?
You
The
don't
police
think they
have to
could have
decide that
hired
you own
people
slaves.
privately? You don't think they could have hired
Wait,
people
they did hire
privately to
people
enforce it?
privately.
Yeah, they did. They did. Of
They-
course.
they had-
They used the
yeah, they
market
absolutely
to
did.
enforce this shit. Like, you act as if
No, the
now, the
police
government
enforce
was used too.
the police
most
enforce
definitely.
your ownership of slaves. That's why
But
they're
they
slaves.
definitely
If
created
you had
a
to
market.
enforce
but
that
locally
yourself,
there were
it
also
would
like
be
bounty hunters and
insanely
whatnot
expensive,
that
right?
would go out and hunt down your slave if they got away. Like they didn't totally rely on the police in all cases.
But they did rely on the police mostly, right? The police.
No.
I'm not aware of that being the case.
Yeah. I don't think
If it was
it's
not
true- it's true that if
legal
the
to
police-
own
if the police
slaves,
got
it would be
involved
very
in-
difficult to own slaves, don't you think?
Okay,
You had
but
to
if,
actually
you, but if the
imprison them
government wasn't
yourself
saying
and pay
either
the
way,
cost
if
of,
the
like,
government
building
wasn't
giant
saying
walls
either
around your
way,
plantation
Yeah, if the
and having
government
armed
took-
guards
government was
everywhere,
saying I wasn't.
If the
and
was
if they
government
escaped,
took no
you have to
stance-
pay people to go out and hunt them down.
Okay,
Like
if
that
the
could
government took no stance,
radically
they still
increase
would
the
have been
cost
able
of
to
that
That's
kind
so
hire
of
much
bounty hunters,
cheaper.
which
That's
they
so
did.
much cheaper than paying for a bunch of employees, right? Because if you have slaves, you
No.
got to control the cost
With
of,
all
the
those
cost of their
costs,
food, the
you know
cost
how
of
much
their
it costs to
housing,
keep someone
the
in
cost of
prison?
fucking
Isn't it
everything,
something
right?
like
and you get to
$100,000 a
beat them
year to
down
imprison
and make sure
someone?
they don't revolt, whatever the fuck, right? So this is why they had these slaves in the first place, and why their economies in a lot of these places totally fucking fell apart because they weren't ready for the end of slavery. Right. So, and they didn't
weren't.
just rely on the state. There were private bounty hunters, private companies that would go out and hunt
But you have to
slaves
pay them.
down. Right. Okay. You have to pay them. Right. But you're still
Certainly.
making
You don't
way
have to
more
pay the
money by
police.
having the slaves in the first place. So this
By
problem
having
was
the police
caused
enforce the
by there
slave
being a
laws,
market for human beings.
You're socializing
This
the
is a
cost,
market
right,
problem
of slavery.
and
Wait,
the
you
government
don't think
has
they
to
paid the
society
police?
pay
Do you
to
not think they
enforce
paid
your
the
ownership
police?
over
You think the
slaves.
police did it for free?
So
You think
Yeah.
the police weren't paid?
Police are a
How do
public
you
service.
think how do you think they got?
Holy
no.
fuck!
Wait,
There's a
let-
difference between the government and private business.
Yeah,
God
can I,
damn.
let me,
we
let me
understand,
split hairs, please.
But you guys are saying that if the police weren't helping you hunt down your slaves, they would just have no slaves. So that's not the fucking case. I don't know
It
why
wouldn't be worth it.
believe
You'd
that.
have to spend
It absolutely
way
would be
more
worth
than you
it for
get
these
out of
people.
productivity
This
from
is
the
exactly
slave in
what
order
they
to
did.
enslave them.
They
It'd be
hired
cheaper
private
to just
bounty
hire
hunters when
someone.
the police couldn't find those slaves.
30 seconds, please.
So-
Just
absolute 30
First-
seconds, and I have to go,
Yeah,
Katie.
yeah,
She's
yeah,
been
yeah.
waiting very patiently.
yeah. So LU,
Like the rest of the fuckers.
your core issue, your core thing about the police actually being a socialized thing, where the entire society actually pays for the burden of the police versus the actual slave owners. You're absolutely correct on. Here's the other side of that argument that I want to give you, and that is while slavery is technically is very inefficient, is that the wealth the wealth gained from the labor of practicing slavery enough to counteract the expense of keeping the slavery in place. That is like the fundamental economic calculus here. And I'm going to say that history, for me, has shown that it is actually revenue positive to have slavery, even with its expense of security.
So we're comparing the cost of slavery. So first, like, are we talking about social cost, the cost to all of society, or the cost to an individual person?
The individual. If the individual
Okay.
didn't have the police to enforce this, right, is that
Right.
you have to have somebody do that, right? That
So we're
bears
looking
cost.
at slave labor versus wage labor. Wage
Yes.
labor, I have to pay someone, and they voluntarily come and work. I don't have to imprison them. They choose to come and work. I just have to pay them money. For a slave, I don't pay them, but I still have to feed them and keep them alive. I also have to imprison them, which means I have to prevent them from escaping from the plantation. That makes the plantation a lot more expensive. To see how much more expensive, just look at a prison and look how much it costs to actually imprison people and make them
Not
work.
comparable.
No.
You-
Let me just hard counter this real quick. Do we have hard line ethical standards in how we treat prisoners versus how we used to treat slaves? Because I think that's very relevant.
Prisoners are not treated super well, but even if you, could you lower that to the point where it becomes cheaper than just hiring some minimum wage worker to do the work? Who's probably going to be a little more productive since they're not, a slave and miserable.
We're over the 30
her
seconds.
printer-
We're over the 30 seconds.
Yeah, I know.
And,
Thank you, Frank.
I'm not sure how that's super relevant. Let's go, Matt. All right, Katie, please.
I think if you're going to keep, it seems like because we all agreed that the market works with like a profit in mind, then we're all pretending like everyone is trying to get the most profit as possible. And they will do that under all circumstances. Having slavery was better than paying like livable wages to employees that weren't your slaves. That's just true. It was cheaper. Could it have been more cheap? Sure, it was cheap enough to why people did it. Okay? But the more, so I'm not touching the slavery thing because I just think it's very weird, like, besides of what I said. You mentioned a while ago that, like, gay marriage, like, became, the issue with it being legalized is that marriage in general was already, like, codified into law. So it was about, like, making the government recognize gay marriage, basically, right? You remember saying that? So it feels to me like your argument is literally government makes law. So if the law turns out to be bad and they change it, that doesn't matter because they already made the law. And I'm kind of, so is arguing with you about politics just about you're just going to say government bad? And that's like what it comes down to? Because I feel it's what you're saying. Because you agreed with me earlier that the government can do things, but it seems like your general argumentation with every angle that we're coming from this is like government bad, basically. So I'm confused because then I can't argue with you because I just disagree. I think governments can do better. But if you think that a government cannot do well under any circumstances and you just literally argue for no government, I don't know how to engage with that.
I'm not arguing for. Okay, maybe there's a better way to explain my point. When you guys talk about markets, you argue about, use economic arguments to say what markets will tend to do based on people's incentives. But then when you argue for the government, you don't apply that standard. Instead, you just talk about what the government can do. The government could do this wonderful thing because they have the authority to do it. But why not apply the same standard to government? Why not look at what does economics say about not what the government can do, but what will they do? What do their incentives say that we should expect them to do? I just want to apply the same argument that you apply to markets, apply that same criteria to governments and see which one is like more likely to do better at addressing this problem.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you my personal take on it. I think people do that because with a government, we understand the structure. We understand what it can, it cannot do. And markets and economy, for all the wonderful, wonderful years of school of learning econ and shit like that, at the end of the day, markets are a lot harder to predict than just saying the government could do this if we wanted it to do it, right? So
okay, but
when I think about, just let me finish for a second. So when we were fighting and there was yelling and screaming, I'm saying, look, I have the government and I want to reduce discrimination by as much as I can. So I don't mind activating that power to making it happen. And then Doobie swooped in for me and he was like, well, if the guy won't do the gay wedding cake, then like take his license away. And I'm like, fucking great idea. I'm down with that. That's good. I think other people are not as willing to activate government power, but then they just gesture to the market as if the market is doing anywhere near a reasonably good enough job for it to be worth it. And maybe we just have different thresholds on what type of improvement we want to make. If half this panel think that the guy who refused the wedding cake for the gay couple losing money but not losing his business is a good enough consequence for what happened, then as far as I'm concerned, that does not end discrimination. That in fact tell that person that he could withstand that happening repeatedly and they would not stop. And I thought the panel was about like maybe if we're okay with that happening. But if we're okay with like kind of trying and maybe we'll kind of do something a little bit sometimes, then yeah, we just have different thresholds of what outcomes we're actually aiming for.
So if the question is, If you were the absolute dictator and in charge of the government, should you use your authority to pass laws to force people to do good things? Then perhaps the answer is yes. But the thing is, I'm not interested in that question because nobody is ever in that position, right? We're not in that position. So I consider that kind of discussion just sort of like fantasy intellectual masturbation. It doesn't,
Sure.
and I think progressives fall into thinking that way too much, especially when they're comparing with markets. I think if you're going to have this government, like it's much better to talk about to approach the government the same way you approach markets and look
Do you
at
not think
how
it's
will
fantasy to think that if somebody doesn't hire an Irish person and they hire someone else because they're white, that somehow means that now the market is going to punish them for it? That's just what you
it
hope
will
it will
impose a
be.
cost on them. That's not a fantasy. That's very
But
easy to show
why
that
why would
with
we approach
economic
these
arguments.
things in the
But we
same
agreed
way?
that it's not about like max, it's not always going to be about like making the most amount of profit. It's just making more profit. And sometimes you can even make a deficit
All I'm
like the
saying,
cake
you keep
baker
going to this
and
absolute
not.
argument. You keep saying, well, your thing, you can't guarantee that this problem will completely. I know it can't
And
guarantee it.
no,
That's
that's
not the
why I said that
question.
maybe we have different threshold because I care about outcomes.
I don't have any
I care
threshold.
about equity.
I don't. It's not a matter of threshold. It's just a matter of which approach is better. And judging by the same, if you're applying the same standard, the market approach to solving problems is generally going to do better than the political approach because
No, because
no
I've
one
established
gets
that
to
my
decide what the
approach
government
gets
does.
the
No one
outcomes
gets to
that I
decide that.
want, and you haven't, right?
Okay.
So
You don't have an approach that gets the outcomes you want. You have no approach. Your approach is, I am the government and I can do anything and I decide what happens.
So,
But
okay.
that's not a realistic approach. That's
Okay.
not a
We live in
solution.
a
Okay.
we have
Okay.
laws in place to.
Okay.
We're not talking about the
I gotta
existing laws.
respect
We're talking
everyone's
about
time, and
Okay.
we've run out of time for this particular panel. Okay. But to my audience, we will continue on to our open walk-on panel. If you have disagreed with what's happened here, and you guys you've had big feelings about this topic and the last one as well, right? Well, then we're going to give you space to do that, right? So we'll have open walk-on panel right after this. Where awesome members like you, yes, you're sitting at home, may participate. So stick around. We have more of that content. Hit that follow button right now if you're new to the channel. If you just showed up here, I've been enjoying what we're doing. Hit that follow button right now. Make sure notifications are on so you know I'm going live. We do this all the time, 6 nights a week, and we have social media, right? So check out our social media, right? So we got an exclamation point, social. In chat, we have Twitter where we tweet stuff, right? And let you know what's going on. Discord, again, where we have that open walk-on panel and other conversations. We've got a big community. Want you to be a part of that community, so come on down. We'd love to have you. And then, of course, we have YouTube where we have the VOD. So like, comment, and subscribe. Consider becoming a YouTube member, hitting that join button, supporting this community, right? Supporting the channel so that you get that content regularly. All right, I'm going to give an outro to all these amazing individuals, but the content does not end, right? After this outro, we'll still have more content, so stick around for that. Okay, we'll start with Dylan. Dylan, thanks for being here.
Glad to see you're enthused about my appearance, Prime. Always brightens up my day. I guess I was happy to be here. I didn't prepare as much as I should have. It's been a long day. Nice chatting to some new faces I haven't interacted with. Wick, last username, Robeman. But otherwise, I mean, it's nice to see you again, Ty, Katie, Doobie. All lovely people. Very happy to talk to you guys yet again. I guess feel free to follow me if you liked my opinions for whichever reason you like the political lunacy of myself. You can find me on YouTube under the name Dylan Blay. You can find me on Spotify, which I will in fact link in the chat briefly at the suggestion of Prime from earlier. Because marketing, am I right? Markets, yes. So thanks for the great discussion. I'm very tired. I'm gonna go to sleep. Spent all day moving. Spent all day yesterday pushing carts around a grocery store parking lot. Again, woohoo, free markets. And yeah, good night. Good night, y'all.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Next we have before that, LJ Steele. Thank you for the kind 5 hot tier 1 gift subs to the channel. Helps us out a ton. Thank you so much. If we get 2 more individual people, because ourselves a hype train and a good position because of LJ still. But yeah, sub to channel, gift bits or gift subs. But thank you LJ still for being so kind and gifting 5 subs. All right, let's go to Wick, Death of Certainty. All right. Person again, he proves why I need to have him on more often, right? I have him on a bunch already. I need to have him on more often. So all black everything. You'll make it there before Doobie, I'm sure. So let's go.
That would be interesting. But thank you for having me. It's one of my favorite panel shows to come on. I really enjoy the discourse, even when I'm yelling and screaming and get passionate about things. I think these are important topics and we need to talk about them. My channel is twitch.tv/Death of Certainty. Please give me a follow. I'm trying to rebuild myself back up after my absence. We have a lot calmer conversations about interesting topics. And even if you hate my takes, I'd be glad to have you on and have a discussion where I try my best to be as good faith as possible. I think that having difference of opinions is important, and being able to hear out the other side and treat them charitably as possible is very important, because I want them to do that to me. It's a golden rule kind of thing. So thank you for having me again. Check me out, twitch.tv/Death of Certainty. Love you all. Roadman, love the robe. Last username, we disagree, but I don't think you're unreasonable here. I just think you're wrong. So there we go.
Hey, thank you. Roadman, thank you as well for coming through. Keeping it lively. Much appreciated, my man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Prime. Always appreciate you having me on these panels. You can catch me at Twitch. Just search Roadman. I've been doing streams with my wife. We had a charcuterie board stream where we built a charcuterie board on stream, so you can check that out. It's on the VOD. We have a lot of deep talks, stuff like that. I play games with people. Come by, follow me. I'll play games with anybody. I'm streaming pretty much every day, having a good time. Again, Prime, always appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Okay. Last username, thank you for coming through. And I figured you'd be the center of that last topic. I figured you'd get a lot of attention for some reason. Just for your good looks. So thanks so much, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I did hear a lot of those 4 little words that I love to hear. I agree with last username during this panel, and so I'm always happy about that. Of course, in the second topic, I heard it less, but that's fine. I love actually the pylons and arguing against everyone. Those are on actually the times I remember and have the fondest memories of, because it's, I don't know, it's like flexing in the gym. It's just I love the adrenaline rush. So yeah. Good to be here, and let's do it again sometime.
Thank you. All right, next I'm going to go to Tiberius. Tiberius, thank you for coming through and sticking Sith mode. This is your best mode, is actually Sith mode. So Tiberius, tell a little about yourself.
Yeah, what's going on, everyone? So I'm Tiberius D. My political leanings are actually like center right of some kind of of some kind of deal. I can't talk today. Anyway, yeah, like one of my best friends is Counterpoints, aka Connor. If you guys are familiar with him, me and him agree on like 90% of fucking everything. So if you like him, you'll probably like me. But I tend to focus more on like the technical details, where he kind of does the more social gravitas of let me fight. I'm just more of like the hey, talk to me about this in the practical sense. So if that kind of floats your boat, definitely come check me out. I am the host of the Mascot Podcast on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And I usually throw up a panel every now and again of just people talking about a more nuanced, complicated issue. I've had a long-standing series right now on Thursdays talking about like the chaos and disorder that we're going through and what's causing it and how it does end. And we've talked about the monopoly structures that we keep finding. We talked about demographics. We've talked about all of these things within the banking system that is making everything look weird and crazy. If any of that interests you, check it out on Twitch or YouTube. Thank you very much for having me, Prime. It's always a pleasure, man. Thanks so much for seeing last username. Whenever we don't agree, he always puts up a great fight. Wick, good to see you again. Dylan, like, I hate you, but you're still okay. So without further ado, thank you very much.
Okay. Next, Doobie, our Dark Lord and Savior. Doobie, thanks for coming through, putting up a great fight. As usual, right? And sometimes you come at these arguments from angles I don't expect. So it was nice, and I thought I would despise everything you said today, but I didn't, so that's great. Juby, thanks for being here.
Okay, so my girlfriend actually just came to the room and yelled at me for defending Russia. So I got to be very, very clear. I'm not defending Russia, okay? Fuck Russia. But Putin's a nice guy, I'm sure. I'm Doobie. I help run the politics server on Discord, discord.gg/politics. Boji, this is for you, you dumb bitch. In 2 seconds.
Okay. Well, oh yeah. Oh, god damn it. Our friend Boji here has a very, very specific foot fetish. It's that she demands be serviced constantly.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah. Very strange. Okay, but I don't mind.
Okay, but we love her nonetheless. All right, but she's weird as fuck. Next, last, and best of all, we have Katie. Katie, I was so happy to have you here, right? But I asked you to come on, and you were like, sure, I'll do it. And I'm like, fuck yes, right? Like, my day is better now that Katie is here. Katie crushing with the arguments, and like fucking everyone agreed in chat, right? Because my chat's the best chat. They recognize greatness when they see it. So Katie, thank you for coming through. Thank you so much. It wouldn't have been as great without you.
Aw. Thank you, Doobie's girlfriend, for doing what's right.
God's work.
Somebody needs to, yes, like you're a soldier. We appreciate you. Wick, I'm gonna say this on stream. I've only known you from like since you came back, so maybe you have opinions I disagree with and I'll regret this, but as of now, I haven't heard you say anything I don't like. Sure, sometimes you're too nice for my taste, but that's okay. So people need to stop bully Wick. Wick is a good guy. Last username, I think it's really interesting, like how the first topic went versus the second one, and yeah, I had a good time.
All right, well, thank you so much, chat. I didn't say, I mean, you're great, but like not number one. Katie's number one in this formula here. Okay, all right. People are getting their heads expanding. All right, egos need to be shrunken. All right, let's. We're going to on to our open on panel. Anyone here can join us. But if not, that's okay. Thanks for spending your time, your energy, your knowledge, and your passion with my community. I know they appreciate it just as much as I do. Have a good one. Bye.